All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is now 6 o'clock. We'll have some others here. Before we get started, I'd like to, as the chair, I'd like to take a moment and express my utmost gratitude to this committee and the people that sit on this committee. This is not an easy place to sit, and we take on some pretty thorny issues on occasion. But the most important part of this committee is that everyone feels free to speak their mind at this table. And that is the most important part of the work that we do here. So I hope that everyone can keep an open enough mind and be able to feel free to go ahead and speak your mind on any issues that may come up during this, especially during this budget deliberation season, as well as in the future, anything that may come up in the middle of any of our fiscal years. But I wanted to express my deepest gratitude for all the support that I get from this group, as well as all of the work that you do and the comments that you make. Thank you so much. All right, so let's move on. How about our? Are there any changes to the Finance Committee?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the Dalton Finance Committee meeting of Wednesday, December 6th, 2023.
Second. A motion's been made and seconded to approve the minutes of the December 6th Finance Committee meetings. All those in favor signify in the usual manner.
Aye.
All those opposed. All those abstaining. That is unanimous. Thank you. The abstainer man isn't here tonight.
Yeah.
I feel bad. I must say. So I've been in discussions with Tom Hutchison, and we have these guidelines in front of us here. These are the final guidelines that are going to be followed by the select board and and of course the finance committee and the department managers. And as you can see, my pencil marks did indeed come out. This is how I kind of arrived at the schedule for this coming year's budget deliberations. So what I did was I put a week between. I tried to put a Wednesday, a week after the meeting that the budgets were approved and sent to us by the select board. And that's the part that I think is going to really be very helpful, because we're going to be able to compile, we're going to be able to put these together. All of you will have a week to look at them. Alyssa Marcino will be emailing everyone the budgets electronically, so everyone's going to receive PDFs of them. Hopefully we will have PowerPoint presentation as we go down through these budgets. We'll be able to put them up on that screen. As I understand, we have a projector available to us. We should be able to put things up, and I'm going to have a really cool computer, because I know somebody in this room is going to hook me right up. Or at least straighten out the one I have, whatever. So hopefully we'll have all of the equipment to really make this go much more smoothly this year than we've had in the past. So, but as I understand, the select board is very much on board with the schedule and they are ready to kind of tackle the task. They didn't have a meeting this past Monday, so that I could just verify that everything was a go with them and maybe firm up a little more of the CBRSD stuff. So, do any of you see any problems with this schedule? That's the kind of the main objection, or the main objective this discussion. The only meeting that I saw that may be problematic for some people was the February 14th, being Valentine's Day. I didn't know if that was going to be problematic. If it's problematic, then we can adjust either, as you noticed, we can adjust to the 13th. And what's that? You have a date for that night? Well, we can make it February 13th, or we can go further out to the 20th.
I'll work it out.
You'll work it out. Okay. Is your date with us? What chance?
We'll see.
We'll see. Oh, good. So anyways, if there aren't any objections, I would say we can, do we want to vote to adopt this, or are we just going to let it kind of, there's Tom.
Evening, everybody.
Welcome. A good goal.
So CDRC will
We're,
squeeze in here somewhere.
yeah, right now, it looks like CBRSD is going to be presenting March 14th. They will be adopting their final budget. That'll be for presentation. So that's where the possible March 27th meeting comes in.
Okay,
It depends, it'll depend on, a little on the select board, when they are gonna review and maybe adopt that budget. So the budget will be complete, we should be reviewed by Wednesday, March 6th, but we won't have, and that's been a little bit of the rub with relationship to these things. They wanna have, for the CBRSD budget, they would like to, on March 18th, to have a combined finance committee and select board
oh, I
meeting.
see, yeah.
The select board wants to sign, they'd like to sign the warrant that evening, which is fine with us. And then, of course, we'll be meeting on the 20th, so we can have that meeting, but we can do our ratification of that budget on the 20th.
Okay,
So, and that, I think, is just to help allow for questions from the entire group, so they only have to meet with people once.
All right,
That's just for efficiency.
so the 13th is joint tentatively.
The 18th, March 18th, but of course.
And the 13th, there's a CDRSD,
Well, we have our regular finance committee meeting, but that, I don't think CRBRSD is going to be meeting with us. That one I might cancel, the 13th.
okay, so March 18th is tentative for the select board.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Because the regular finance committee meeting is so close to the 11th, when they approve these last budgets, so I decided to push it out to the 20th.
Okay.
It was just that it was one of those where we would address them at either time, so that would work out well. And hopefully, if everything clicks, we should be able, we may have things all wrapped up on March 20th, which would actually is generally about 2 weeks earlier than we usually have the budget ready. So that'd be really a pretty cool thing. We can make it happen. So hopefully we will.
Is there a finalized projected budget that, based on all departments submitting numbers?
Not yet. They should have that information, I think, well, they should be monitoring that as it goes along. I don't think they have anything to project yet, because they don't have all the budgets in. But they don't have all the budgets in.
Is there a deadline for the budgets being in?
Yeah. Take a look. That's what that's all about.
Uh-huh.
Budget's completed and reviewed by Wednesday.
What page you on? The first column?
I would be on that page.
Okay.
That's where I started. So that by.
So January 22nd. Oh,
Yes,
completed and
January.
reviewed by the 17th and then approved by the select board on the 22nd, right?
Right. They'll be approved by that, and that's the start of it. And then what we do is we go along and plug our information into the worksheet. We haven't
Understand, but
prepared
if
the
we back
worksheet
up
yet.
and just take a look at the overview, it's a thing that you were suggesting, and I think is a great idea, is we have an idea of what the overall projected numbers are going to be for, based on what people submit.
Yeah, and they
And
haven't.
we'll have it by we'll have it by January 22nd.
I don't know if they'll have all of that, because all of these budgets won't be reviewed by the select board at
Well,
that point. I don't know if they can. I don't know
The
if that's
difference
possible.
between, it's when I'm looking at not what's been approved, but it's basically the first cut. So everybody turning in their gross numbers, not their final numbers, but their initial anticipations, so we can see where things are going.
Oh, I don't know if they're gonna do that. I haven't.
So we don't have
Back
a
in-
guidance, we don't have sort of a,
So what's this page?
That's what I was,
This-
I just said,
Did you read this, Tom?
yeah.
this page right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, they have.
Doesn't it start right off
Yeah,
with
they-
saying the enclosed 25 planning budget, in the third paragraph, summarized below? Revenues conservatively estimated at such and such, expenses 2.5%. I mean, isn't this what you're asking?
It's the 50,000-foot view of what I'm asking. You know, I'd like, having a little bit better breakout is what I was kind of hoping for, because when they did that initial spreadsheet, they handed us out, everything was all kind of laid out, and they had rough numbers. And there are like 5 or 6 categories, and I thought it would be kind of helpful to know, oops, the police are going up by 40% this
Oh.
year. So when we deliberate about early things, we know we have to be scrutinizing a little bit closer. And this just...
So those
this-
must have been,
I think those were just a, kind of a,
Well, what they handed out, but it was kind of in
Something like
line with
this
what
one.
you were asking for at the end of last fiscal year session, when we were kind of going, oh, geez, it would have been good to know that, you know, we were going to be looking at a 3.7% or whatever it turned out to be increase. If we had kind of known that ahead of time, we could have asked better questions or looked at things differently. If we had some, not that we need the final 3.7, but, you know, if they project through and it said if it was going to be 3.2 or 4.9, it doesn't matter. What it is just sort of a guide bar to tell us that this is kind of what they're shooting for, and gives us a litmus of whether we have to turn the crank a little harder on people, or no, we can be a little bit looser, because it looks like, you know, overall, things are going to be fine this year. And of course, the big ticket item, the school budget, we can't know what that is, because they have no idea, because the state doesn't tell them anything. So that's always up in the air, but aside from that, the rest is relatively controllable. And so I was kind of hoping that we might have that little guide bar to do stuff.
well, they did provide that, that was the guide bar that he did provide, that Tom had provided for us, was I'm trying to remember what the thing looks like now. Oh God, I can see the thing, it's terrible. But he did, that, the reality of it is that was the guide bar that he gave us then, was that their plan was to, 3.78 was for what was anticipated for salaries, and
And a 2% COLA on top of that.
I thought the whole thing
Shouldn't
encompassed 378.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
2 COLA and 1 cent.
That was, 2 COLA and 178 for the
Step increase.
steps. But I believe that was the case. So they're talking about 2.5% increase in the expenses as well. That was what they were anticipating. So that was that preliminary document that he put up. I wouldn't necessarily hang my hat on it, but in our case, what's really kind of good is if we see an account come in outside of these guide bars, these 2.5 and 378, we should be raising flags, I would say, if it's outside of that. That, and according
My
to their,
concern is that the 2.5% is a hope number, not based on real numbers.
that would be, what the big driver of the 2.5 right now is the anticipation on health insurance. Yes, it was health insurance. Was there's going to be, they're anticipating
9%.
They're anticipating 13 now.
13%?
Yeah, it's up to 13%.
Mhm.
So, and that's the health insurance thing has been a real, I don't know if you're seeing it in your business, but I'm seeing it in mine. Mine's looking at anywhere from 13 to 15 right now. It's like I've seen it right now for health insurance. So, and I have no idea how my company's going to afford it actually this year. So, hopefully because we have a bigger, I think if we have a bigger bigger group, that number will stay a little more manageable, but if this town gets hit with a 15%, that's gonna be painful. It'll be painful. I would have to say, there probably should at that point be some level of cuts elsewhere, if it does end up going to that level, I would have to say. But that would be up to the select board to manage that.
Well, and what I'm trying to do is just get us in a position where we can not lose sight of the forest through the trees.
Well, you got it, yeah.
And many times we're given this little piece and trying to judge the whole based on a little piece. And it's nearly impossible, so we just go, okay. And if we had a better feel for this thing up front, then we could see where people were not following guide rails. Even if we had to end up at a 6% increase or whatever silly larger number it is. If it, we need to, have a little bit better guardrails, so we knew who was really deviating from the plan. That's kind of,
Well,
I mean, it's probably a dream, but I figured, well.
That would be what that would be asking is to produce two different budgets, basically, was what you would be asking, which might be a bit of an extreme, I think. To request two different budgets. Actually, many of the people in the town have already produced their budgets. I quite frankly think if a little legwork was done, they could probably manage to come up with a preliminary number. As I understand it.
I would think that most, if any department's really on the ball, they put any effort to this, that they have their 90% of their stuff done, which is more than enough to be able to say, okay, here's where we stand.
Yeah, I don't know if that's something that I could manage to do, but
I don't think that's ever happened before, has it?
no, it's never happened as far as I know. It's never occurred, and I think if we stay within the guide bars that Tom's put the numbers together to come up with overall numbers that look at that certain level, then I think we can feel confident that at the end, we should be within these guide bars at the end of this. So in other words, the preliminary 25 budget, total town expenses are 22,800 whatever, including education. We paid by the tax, by a levy of 15,000 and other revenues of 7 million. Or 15 million, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think you were off by
A couple thousand bucks. Yeah. The budget is set by the use of any of an unusual high amount of free cash available to a relatively small amount. I do have to say our free cash has been dropping, but I believe it's come in a little higher than anticipated at this point. I don't know the number exactly.
Here he refers to it as the unusually high amount of free cash available.
Yeah.
Might need it.
Yeah.
Like it needs to be spent. Yeah. It's unusually high. So it needs
Well,
to be spent.
that's always been my concern, is that we do have free cash that is relatively high. It can be attributed to a bunch of things. Some of them being positions in the town, people that because our police force has a tendency to ebb and tide, but if we budget for 11 police officers and we only have 9 police officers, and I'm just using the police department as an example because it's kind of the best example, is those, because that budget that portion of the budget ends up not being used, it ends up in free cash.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if there's expenses, there's many expenses that are come up in the town. Plus, we do have a tendency sometimes to get some rather lucrative grants as well. But like this year, we're looking at the 6 months, I was just looking at the 6-month number on I believe it's our IT budget. And we're right on 50% of that budget. I haven't had a chance to send it out yet, but the most recent budget, the financial report, I just haven't, she sent it to me last week, and I just haven't stolen the time to just package it and send it to everyone. But when you start looking at those numbers, you can see where that is, where that can be. Now, something else, too, that we have at our disposal is Karen has made out a 5-year budget layout for us, and everyone is welcome to look at this document. This is a pretty eye-opening document when you start to look at where the money's being spent, money's not being spent, it's over a 5-year period instead of the 1-year period that we look at from this narrow microscope that we, like you said, this narrow microscope that we have year to year. This actually kind of lays it all out to us. And
I'm
it's
sure
really
a lot
good.
of work, and.
She put a ton of work into
Yeah.
that thing. It's great work that she did.
It's good
We
job.
are all gonna be, I'm gonna print up 2 more copies of this thing, and anybody's welcome to look at it now. If you'd like to pass it around, just open it up, take a peek at it. You're welcome to look at it, but what I'm gonna do is that, when we look at a budget this year, we're gonna be able to look at it on that screen. And we'll be able to,
Do we
we'll
look
be
at the
able to
five-
talk.
The 5-year on that?
Yes, we're gonna put the
Oh, nice.
5-year up there where we can
Nice.
see it. The camera will be
That'll
able
be
to see
helpful.
it, they'll see, yes, we're gonna be able to see not just a snapshot, we're gonna be able to see some history.
Bar graphs, how it's gonna be.
No, no part.
Just numbers.
Wow, we want charts.
Bar graph, charts,
Charts,
yeah, you're killing me.
I've done it many times with Excel, so I know.
Well, we'll send you the Excel spreadsheet, let you have at it.
All right.
You're more than welcome to it.
bet he'd do it.
But, oh yeah,
I bet he'd do it.
I would expect nothing less, just to let you know.
I think the challenge is out there.
The challenge is definitely out there. So, I could work with that. I could very much work with that. But there are some rather enlightening numbers within that. I've looked at it and it's like, And I think it explains some of our free cash being what it is. Some of the free cash, what's really, we had a discussion about it. Some of it is kind of untouchable for some reason, but I don't know why. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, so I'm not,
There are guidelines too, that we can't be below a certain threshold on free cash too, right?
yes, right.
So it's there, but
There's some
it's not
guidelines,
there.
that's what we were talking about, is there's some guidelines, there's, for some reason, we couldn't quite, between our bantering for the half hour that we talked about it, we couldn't quite come up with a reason why. We finally decided, okay, we've overthought this thing, and we're gonna go check it out later on, and see what we can come up with. But it looks like we're gonna have a relatively straightforward year. The first or second motion into our budget deliberations is something you'll see that's unusual in the schedule, is there are a bunch of group budgets that are grouped at the $20,000 mark. And at that $20,000, what we're going to try to do, if it works, great. If it doesn't, we go back to the old way. What I'd like to do is we'll look at a motion, we'll entertain a motion of all of those budgets. But the motion is going to be a lengthy one. Of all of those budgets, the final budget, and you have to state including salaries, if there's salaries within the budget. After that, once the motion is made, then we'll all go through it, and we'll put it up on the screen as
Budget by
well.
budget.
We'll go through it budget by budget, look at it. Are there any questions on this budget? If there's questions on the budget, we'll see if we can get the questions answered. Move on to the next budget, and so on and so on.
So
Generally,
basically, instead of it being 50 motions, it'll be one motion to
it'll be
cover 50
one motion,
things.
yes. So that, and
So
all of those,
he only gets to make one motion, and I have to only second once?
well, yeah, you can.
Is that basically the deal?
Yeah, rereading that would be a challenge at best.
Accounts ended up.
And
I thought it was gonna be-
I haven't decided if I'm gonna reread the budget with the numbers.
Maybe we could do it in Washington and make it a little bit easier.
Well,
The actual account
yeah,
balances
the goal was,
at
it's
the end of the year.
like, what, 20 budgets? I think it's like 20 budgets that we'll be looking at. But we just
Box
do
of
it.
5 or 10 and make it still faster.
Yeah, so that was, and generally, that group of that specific group of budget generally eat up at least one, maybe 2 meetings, because we talk about every single one of them, so we're gonna.
That's a lot of words to go over that each one.
Right,
requires.
so, but as it looks right now, we should be able to, barring any major hiccups, we should be able to stick to this schedule without too much trouble. It should be relatively easy. Now, something I wanted to ask this group is,
Before we move on to that, can I
Yes.
ask one other thing? If somebody were to review those budgets ahead of time and say, this budget is flat, or this budget meets guidelines, then we could, if the budget is flat, everybody's gonna say yes to that. So if the deliberation can just simply say, we're looking at such and such budget is flat. Any discussion? All those in favor? Bang. You can really go through it fast if it's flat. Because what do we care? If it's flat, or it's below our threshold of concern of 3%,
well, yeah, the object was to just simply go through a single reading.
well, I understand. Yeah, because if we parse them out, the ones that really kind of fall within our parameters and those that don't, we could focus and deliberate more on the ones that are donors than.
Well, yeah, these $20,000 budgets are all straightforward.
Yep, 400,000 of a $22 million budget, so it's nothing.
Relatively speaking.
Yeah.
Right.
Relatively
Yeah,
speaking.
big to us, big to you and me.
One of
but
the-
small taters to sit
Yeah.
down.
One of the things I just remembered while I was sitting here looking at it, I looked at the bottom line. One of the big drivers of our free cash is actually vocational ed. That's always a big number for us, the big driver for our free cash. It is, that thing is a complete roll of the dice and you try, one year we tried to
Cut it back a little.
cut it back and try to reduce that. Lo and behold, we
flood.
we ended up with a flood. It was like this. I think we ended up going back to special town meeting. I think that was I think that was the year we had like 4 special town meetings a year. Oh yeah, it was terrible. But it was that was one of those where it is that one. We also, there's almost $200,000 we get is a grant for our communication center. That's another driver. So when you start adding it up, we were pretty fortunate in this town with all the various things that we do plus the good management of the budget over the years.
Mhm.
So. All right, are there any concerns with the budget deliberation schedule?
Nope.
That looks good. And I think that's all I really wanted to get after.
That's it, that's the end of the agenda.
That is, that's the end.
We adjourn. We said that's the end.
That's the end of the budget, the budget discussion. We had
Sorry.
the minutes of the meeting. We had minutes of the December 6th meeting. That was the initial one. We did that. The final budget, we went over the final budget guidelines. And then the Finance Committee budget schedule, which I compiled. And I've actually given that budget over to Melissa, and she sees it as a good, she's gonna plug it into the guidelines.
Mhm. Okay.
So that is all I have. Does anyone else have anything to come before the committee? Seeing or hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Motion been made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor signify in the usual manner.
Aye.
All those opposed? All those abstaining?